We begin this morning one step closer to full approval of vaccines for kids ages 5 to 11.
The FDA Advisory Committee okayed the use of Pfizer's vaccine for children, agreeing the benefits of the shot outweigh the risks. The recommendation from the committee was nearly unanimous. 17 voted in favor, with just one member abstaining. Well, several concerns were raised during the review. Many advisors were encouraged by the fact the kids' vaccine uses a lower dosage. Next up, the FDA will discuss the committee's recommendation in the coming days. If approved, the CDC will then meet next week to review the data from Pfizer. It's up to CDC Director Rochelle Walensky to give final approval, potentially giving parents the option to vaccinate their kids before the holidays. Now, this all comes as COVID cases continue to dramatically drop across the country. The latest CDC data shows cases have decreased by 57% since the peak of the Delta wave in September. That's renewing hope the U.S. could be turning a corner in the fight against COVID. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Uche Blackstock joins us now with more. Dr. Blackstock is an emergency medicine physician and the CEO of Advancing Health Equity. Doctor, always good to have you with us. Let's begin with vaccines for kids. What were some of the biggest concerns presented by the committee, and can we expect to have some of those concerns answered now in the coming days?
Thank you so much for having me on, Joe, this morning. So one of the biggest concerns was the risk of the vaccines. We know that one of the more common side effects that we've seen is myocarditis or pericarditis, which is inflammation of the outside of the heart. And we've seen this mostly in young men, young males receiving this vaccine. So a number of members of the committee had concerns over this. We know that it's quite rare, although it's higher than the background rate of myocarditis. But the members overall decided that the benefits of the vaccine do indeed outweigh the risks.
Let's talk about an issue that I know is important to you. A new NBC News analysis of CDC data shows COVID vaccination numbers among children are drastically different depending on where the child lives in America. How much should we be worried about this vaccine inequality among kids? And what are some of the biggest hurdles for doctors in trying to get children these shots?
Right. So a lot of really interesting data came out of that meeting yesterday, and we saw that Black and Latino and Native American children about 3 times as likely to be hospitalized with COVID-19. They represent about 2/3 of the children's deaths from COVID-19. And so this is obviously very concerning. We know that where children and people live influence their health outcomes. And so obviously this is an area that the CDC and federal, state, and local leaders need to pay attention to, because we may see widening of these disparities if we don't see increased vaccine uptake in these communities.
And finally, let's talk about perhaps some reason for optimism, Dr. Blackstock. We mentioned earlier COVID cases across the U.S. continuing to fall pretty dramatically after the spread of the Delta variant hit the country hard this summer, especially hit the South hard. So it's a big question. Is this the light at the end of the tunnel? Anything around the corner that worries you at all?
Right. So that's always the million-dollar question. I would say we have to be very cautious. We're headed into cold weather. Only 7 states have indoor mask mandates. And so we've been here before. We've seen surges and we've seen declines. We're hopeful that now we'll have 28 more eligible Americans for this vaccine with the approval hopefully next week for children 5 to 11. But I would say we have to remain very cautious. The Delta variant is incredibly unpredictable. We don't know if this decline is as a result of human behavior or virus biology. And so again, masking, getting vaccinated, getting your boosters, all of that will be incredibly important for this decline to continue.
Of course, we were in a very similar position 1 year ago. Dr. Blackstock, as always, appreciated. Thank you.
Now, the pressure is on for Democrats to reach a deal on President Biden's social safety net bill. A potential new billionaires tax and certain action on climate change are among the issues still being negotiated. Despite the deadlock, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he was hopeful a deal is within sight.
I know that Democrats in both chambers are working really hard to get this consequential, desperately needed legislation across the finish line. No one ever told us, no one ever said that passing transformational legislation like this would be easy. I believe a final deal is within reach.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now. Ali, good morning. So obviously an optimistic tone there from Senator Schumer, but there are some key things that still haven't been worked out. I want to ask you about those two specific things I mentioned in just a second. But first, remind us where we stand now and what we can expect today.
Well, he's right that it wouldn't be easy. I'm not so sure, though, that he literally means within reach, or he may. This has been shifting so quickly on Capitol Hill, but what does seem clear as Wednesday starts here in Washington is that this is the day that they were aiming to have those votes, at least on the bipartisan infrastructure bill in the House. And in order to do that, they need a framework or potentially even more than that, depending on which progressives you talk to, in order to get to that vote. Certainly, they're not there yet. And so the negotiating continues and round we go.
So, Ali, let's now talk about some of these sticking points. Climate change in this, it's one of the big ones. Are progressives afraid those provisions could be reined in the process of trying to just get this deal done?
Well, certainly, and some of them already have. That clean energy program that Joe Manchin nixed about a week ago is not at this point in the bill, though it could come back in. But yes, funding for climate change is critically important to progressives, but that's also not the only priority of theirs that they've seen fall out or likely fall out of this bill. I've been talking, for example, to many progressives as well as advocates on the paid family leave side of this who saw their proposal whittled down from 12 weeks of paid family leave to 4, and now Manchin saying, according to our sources, that he doesn't support that in the bill at all. So free community college is another thing. As I was talking to Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal yesterday, she said at one point it's painful. She wanted it all in there. Certainly many Democrats felt that way because at the beginning of this process, you'll remember, they were talking about having to choose between these proposals as if they were having to choose their favorite child. This has been a painful process for progressives and, frankly, Democrats across the board. Not everyone is going to get what they want in the bill. That's the reality of compromise. Nevertheless, this has been a painful process in terms of weeding things out, especially when you consider here, I know we say we're far along, and certainly we're further along with clearer eyes on this process than we've ever been, but at the same time, they're still figuring out what the final price tag is. Manchin has said 1.5, but when you start adding these proposals up, it's possible that it could be a little bit more than that, and certainly Democrats are going to try to get it up as high as they can. So they're negotiating on both sides of this, the pay-for front, the overall price tag front, and then also the policy front.
And then along with all that is that billionaire's tax plan that is also a sticking point. Ali Vitale, thank you so much.
The race to become Virginia's next governor is shaping up to be a pivotal election. Polls give Democrat Terry McAuliffe a very narrow lead over Republican rival Glenn Youngkin. President Biden joined McAuliffe at a rally yesterday and questioned Youngkin's ties to former President Trump.
Terry's opponent has made all of his private pledges of loyalty to Donald Trump. But what's really interesting to me, he won't stand next to Donald Trump now that the campaign's on. Think about it. He won't allow Donald Trump to campaign for him in this state. And he's willing to pledge his loyalty to Trump in private. Why not in public? What's he trying to hide? Is there a problem with Trump being here? Is he embarrassed?
NBC News reporter Gary Grumbach is following the Youngkin campaign. Joins us now from Roanoke, Virginia. So, Gary, just picking up off those comments by President Biden, is Trump casting a shadow over Youngkin's campaign? Is there a sense this election is going to boil down to a battle of ideals between not the two guys on the ticket, but rather between Biden and Trump?
Hey there, Joe. Yeah, Donald Trump is not running to be the next governor of Virginia, but Democrats, as you heard there, would like you to think he is. But at Glenn Youngkin events, Trump's presence really does loom large. You see everything from the MAGA hats that people come in wearing. The Trump playlist is even very similar to the Youngkin playlist that's played over the speakers. But not everyone's convinced that this race is really about Donald Trump. I want to introduce you to a woman named Daphne that I met last night.
Donald Trump is not running this race, okay? It's not about Donald Trump. It's about what we want, okay?
Okay, but if it's not about Donald Trump, is it about Joe Biden?
Well, Joe Biden is taking direction from Obama and the squad and all of that. His ideas is wrong for this country, okay?
But it's not about Donald Trump, so why is it about Joe Biden?
because Joe Biden is the president. Donald Trump is not the president. Okay? Donald Trump is out of the picture. Has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Now, it's not just Daphne. There's been a number of people that I talked to over the past day that said they are two different people. Yes, they are both business owners. Yes, they're both considered political outsiders, but Glenn Youngkin is his own man. Joe?
So, Gary, beyond Trump, were there any other big talking points looming over yesterday's rally?
Yeah, the idea of parents' involvement in their children's classroom is something that has come up across the country in school board meetings and in town council meetings all over the place, not just in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but that conversation has come here to the Commonwealth, and it's really where it started, if you remember, up in Loudoun County. But that conversation really is here, and while Democrats view it as a controversy, Republicans view it as potential policy. Here's what Glenn Youngkin had to say last night.
We will not teach our children to view everything through a lens of race. We won't. Friends, today a political ideology has made its way into our classrooms. It forces all the kids to view everything through a lens of race. It divides us into buckets. And then it pits our kids against one another. Our kids aren't brought up that way. They're brought up to love everyone. On day one, I will ban critical race theory from being in our schools.
Now, what exactly would he be banning there? Well, critical race theory is the idea of the fact that racial bias is baked into U.S. laws and traditions and really institutions as a whole. So Democrats think that's an important thing for students to learn about in school. Republicans think otherwise. Joe?
So interesting, this race. You've got huge national issues at the presidential level, and you've got incredibly local issues at the school board level. So, Gary, less than a week until the election, and polls they're pointing at a very tight race here. How is the Youngkin camp feeling right now? What's next on the campaign trail for them?
Yeah, you're seeing two very different strategies from the McAuliffe and the Youngkin campaigns. McAuliffe, you're seeing these big names, Biden, Obama, Harris, Abrams, coming out in support of their candidate. You're not seeing that same thing on the Republican side. You're seeing school board members and former teachers and local leaders introducing the candidate here. Today, we're starting in Roanoke, where Glenn Youngkin is having a number of meet and greets in the region. And then tonight, he's heading to Blacksburg, of course, the home of college town Virginia Tech, where he's going to be hosting a big rally with John Rich of Big and Rich. Joe?
All right, Gary, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
We could soon learn if criminal charges will be filed after the deadly shooting involving Alec Baldwin on the set of the movie Rust. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department and District Attorney will hold a press conference later today to discuss the investigation. Last week, Baldwin fired a gun that witnesses say was declared safe by the assistant director, that ultimately killed the film's director of photography, Helena Hutchins, and wounded director Joel Souza. MSNBC anchor Yasmin Vasugian joins us now from Santa Fe, New Mexico, with what we can expect. Yasmin, good morning. So it's been almost a week since the shooting, and today we're hoping to get some answers from this press conference. I think the biggest question is probably exactly how did a loaded gun end up in Alec Baldwin's hands, or even on the set for that matter? Investigators say witnesses have described the film's assistant director, Dave Halls, telling Baldwin the gun was safe for use. Do we have any new information this morning about the events leading up to the shooting?
Yeah, so we're trying to get that information, right? That's one of the reasons why we're here to cover this press conference today, happening 10 a.m. local time, noon Eastern time, hearing from the Sheriff's Department and also the District Attorney as well. And you mentioned the possibility of criminal charges. The District Attorney essentially saying, listen, nothing is off the table. This is going to be a very long and painstaking, Savannah, investigation. It could take weeks, if not months, because of the number of folks they actually have to interview, the number of possible witnesses that were a part of the Rust production crew. And that's going to have to kind of go through the rigmarole to make sure that they are going forward with the right path. You talk about and you ask about the events leading up to the shooting of the cinematographer Helena Hutchins, and we have read the affidavit now that was just released a few days ago, talking about the events leading up to that moment. It seems as if 6 crew members had actually walked off the set earlier in the day because of late pay and safety standards. Because of that, they had gotten a late start to the production. They'd actually broken for lunch and then returned after lunch to rehearse the scene in which Helena Hutchins was subsequently shot in. They were inside of a church. Alec Baldwin, the actor, was sitting in a pew. He was practicing something called a cross draw, in which he pulls a gun and points it directly at the camera. Dave Halls, the assistant director who you mentioned, pulled a gun from a table in which 3 guns were sitting on. He yelled cold gun, which in film industry terms, I guess, means essentially this thing is not loaded. He handed the weapon then to Alec Baldwin, who subsequently rehearsed the scene. Helena Hutchins was behind the camera. Joel Souza behind her, looking into the camera. The gun was pulled, pointed directly at the camera. Joel Souza then recounts that's when he heard a whip and a pop. And he saw Helena Hutchins kind of stumble backwards and say subsequently she couldn't feel her legs. He then saw blood coming from his shoulder. Helena Hutchins was clutching her stomach, and the gun from Alec Baldwin was then subsequently handed off to the armorer after that. Those shell casings, that gun then handed off to the investigators. So listen, we're trying to piece together all of these various things that led up to the tragic shooting of Helena Hutchins, and we're hopefully going to be learning more today in this press conference.
Absolutely. You mentioned that crew members are being interviewed and production also has been suspended indefinitely. Yeah. Now, the film's producers also say they've hired their own lawyers to look into the incident. Is that standard procedure for something like this? How's this investigation happening?
Yeah, it is pretty standard procedure. So you got OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, right? It's very standard procedure for them to look into any kind of workplace death. So that is the standard practice for a situation like this, and they're going to move forward with that. Subsequently, the Rust Film Production has hired their own outside law firm that will sit in on all the crew members' interviews with OSHA. And this is something that we have seen before. Obviously, this is not something that happens quite often, but nonetheless, it is Savannah standard procedure.
All right. Yasmin Vasugian in New Mexico for us. Thank you so much.
Millions of Americans along the East Coast were clobbered by strong winds and heavy rain from that powerful nor'easter. The severe weather has left more than 350,000 residents in Massachusetts without power. That number continues to grow this morning. Across the region, many are beginning to clean up as the storm continues to make its way up the East Coast. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss joins us now from New York with the latest on this serious storm. Stephanie, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. You know, the final punch from this nor'easter, now turned bomb cyclone, by the way, officially, is going to be the wind. There's a lull right now here on Long Island, but it's going to pick up again. Here in Long Island, the gusts could get upwards of 60 miles an hour. But listen to this. On Cape Cod, they clocked a wind gust at over 90 miles an hour. That's hurricane strength winds. And when the wind blows that hard, the trees go down and the power goes out. The season's first nor'easter now confirmed as a bomb cyclone lashing the region, leaving tens of thousands across the Northeast drenched and in the dark.
Given these winds, no one should be surprised if they lose power.
The season's first nor'easter lashing the region.
It's crazy out here.
Tens of millions up and down the coast under the threat of flash floods, creating treacherous travel conditions with cars completely submerged in water. Some areas in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut seeing rainfall totals nearing 5 inches in just 24 hours. In Cape Cod, Massachusetts, wind gusts hitting up to 94 miles per hour.
Mother Nature can be pretty beautiful, but this is not a time to be out on the water.
The wind knocking down trees and power lines in a second straight night of severe weather. The storm has claimed at least one life, a 45-year-old kayaker from Westchester, New York, while many communities are cleaning up damage.
We're pretty much getting used to it.
New York and New Jersey not taking any chances, declaring states of emergency for dozens of counties early on, after Hurricane Ida devastated the Northeast just last month, killing at least 11 in New York City, a result of catastrophic flooding.
As we learned tragically last month, floods just don't happen in low-lying or coastal areas. With a heavy downpour, any creek or stream can become a river.
The unpredictable storm coming after the other bomb cyclone that ravaged the West Coast earlier this week, delivering a final blow before it makes its way out.
Just adding insult to injury, but just trying to take it in stride. I'm glad I'm safe.
This slow-moving storm will finally clear out of here, but the cleanup is not necessarily going to be easy. The weather's not going to cooperate. It looks like we've got rain, more rain coming at the end of the week. Joan, Savannah, back to you guys.
All right, Stephanie, let's check that out and get the latest updates on this early season nor'easter. Now, Stephanie reports a bomb cyclone. Our meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us.
Hey, Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning. And yeah, what a storm in especially coastal areas of Massachusetts last night. That's where the winds just howled. It's going to look like the equivalent to, a strong tropical storm or a Category 1 hurricane went through when we get those pictures in during the day. So the storm almost went right over the top of Nantucket. It was the lowest pressure ever measured in Nantucket in the month of October. So this was a rare, powerful storm for this time of year. And now it's slowly going to drift southwards and then out to sea. Notice the rain has already come to an end around New York, and the showers, same for Hartford and most areas of Connecticut. We still have wind gusts around Cape Cod, around Falmouth, around 63 miles per hour. Boston is still gusting to 54, so additional power outages are possible. And I just checked the latest. We're now up to 500,000 people without power. About 450,000 of those are located in eastern Massachusetts. The rest are mostly in Rhode Island, and a few thousand on the Twin Forks, the end of Long Island. So a significant power outage storm and event. Line crews will have their hands full in the next couple days trying to get things restored. So still have those high wind warnings that are up from Boston southwards all the way through the Cape, down to Newport, and even the Twin Forks of Long Island. 40 to 60 mile per hour gusts possible. As Stephanie mentioned, we've had numerous wind gusts up to 80 miles per hour plus from the islands all the way through Cape Cod. So this is how it will look during the day today. The storm slowly moves out. A little bit of rain left from Boston to the Cape, but most other areas will remain dry this afternoon. We also have some severe weather to worry about. Down along the Gulf Coast is the other area of concern. We got about 13 million people under a slight risk or enhanced risk of severe storms, especially in Louisiana. So our active weather pattern continues, but the headline is, you don't mess with 80 mile per hour winds. Even an area like Cape Cod, guys, that gets hit often. 500,000 people waking up in the dark.
Wow. All right, Bill, thank you so much. We'll get more from you next hour.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.